are so thankful to be joined with international filmmaker, activist, and social justice writer Raj Patel, an all-around awesome human being, whose list of work and accomplishments in championing food sovereignty and the liberation of oppressed ecological systems everywhere is overwhelmingly inspiring and incredible. Raj, would you like to say hello to folks?
I would indeed. Hello, comrades. My name's Raj Patel, he, him pronouns. Here I am on occupied land in Austin, Texas, with a loud thunderstorm outside. So if you hear rumbling, it's the windows just being blown in by climate change. But it's lovely to be with you.
Thank you, Raj. Okay, so our Q&A will flow as follows. I will be monitoring the chat box, but I encourage participants to unmute and speak with Raj directly. When we do come to the inevitable stop sign wave situation where a few people might unmute at the same time, and it's like, you go, no, you go, no, you go, I'll help sort that out. So I'm gonna lead in here. We're just gonna jump right in with a quote that we at WFAN have been circling around by beloved Dr. Vandana Shiva, in which she says, and here's my question for you, Raj. Everything is food. Everything is someone else's food. And in that food that comes to our plate are, in space and time, all the relationships that ever were, that made it. Raj, I'm curious, how does this resonate with your experiences, both just as a human and in the film, The Ants and the Grasshopper, including the making and just your experiences with that?
Oh, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, WFAN. I mean, I'm just excited about this. I mean, I think that question is, I mean, that quote is exactly right. That you know, but everything is about the embodied relationships behind it. But food is really sort of at an acute point, because it is those relationships then that literally become us. And in the making of this film, I mean, this film was all about relationships. It was about building relationships of trust with Anita, and then you know, essentially getting over ourselves and confronting our own patriarchy and our own sort of colonial, I mean, our sort of colonial power in filmmaking, by recognizing that this isn't the kind of film that needed, you know, my narration. It was the sort of film that Anita needed to tell. And so, in fact, it was her idea to come to America in the first place, and it was her idea, for example, to put in the scene about her marriage abduction. You know, we asked her 3 or 4 times, you know, are you sure you want that in there? And ultimately she was like, yes, how many times do I have to tell you? Yes, you must put this in, because otherwise people won't know that it can be overcome. And so, you know, but for those relationships to work and for her to be able to call us out, took time. And those relationships took, you know, I mean, this was filmed over 10 years, but, you know, in those 10 years, we've built these deep relationships, and we will continue to, you know, I mean, I'll be working with Anita and with the Soils, Food and Healthy Communities Initiative for the rest of my life, and I'm really pleased to be doing that. So yes, relationships all the way down, but also power and an understanding of how power inflects those relationships all the way down as well.
Thank you, Raj. That's amazing. A decade of story. Folks, I invite anyone to unmute and we can just jump right into Q&A. Heather.
Oh, Heather.
Heather.
Oh, right.
I think that was sign language for I'm going to get some headphones and call in. Yeah.
Got you, Heather.
Hello, Heather.
You hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Oh, perfect. So I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in the Dominican Republic along the Haitian border, and I really love this movie. I follow the connection. I also currently work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm currently on a climate task force for NRCS looking at vulnerable communities. As we speak, we're working on this. And it was very profound seeing the lead woman in this and seeing her community's lack of water. I remember in my community of Puerto Escondido, which is along the Haitian border, seeing Haitian women doing the same thing, looking for water, not having those, having a cooking system similar. And as the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, we are working to create how can we address climate change with conservation practices and through the Farm Bill, working with our farmers. And I thought it was very interesting, some of the responses from farmers that you worked with. I currently am in Oregon, but I am a Michigander, and I love that you had the city of Detroit in there and those Black farmers as well. I don't know what my, exact question is, but I feel like I'm glad that you showed like 2 years later from some of those farmers that you met with, their thought processes, the changes that climate change has impacted them. And then also their changes in food systems. The young man that was originally didn't think about climate change and then changed to organic for poultry. What is a recommendation from you and or from the people that you worked with in Malawi on how we can help NRCS or USDA tell those stories to help producers really understand climate change? Because I understand it takes a while, it takes process, especially we are working with those vulnerable communities. And I have addressed in our work group that the vulnerable communities not only are here in the US, but also across the world. As Secretary Vilsack has said, you know, countries like Haiti and Guatemala and others as well, those are what we do in the US affects those countries. So curious to hear your thoughts, Raj.
Thank you so much, Heather. I mean, briefly, I mean, I think frontline communities everywhere want America to stop doing what it's doing. I mean, I think that, you know, and it was very interesting, you know, we tried to meet with USDA under the last administration. Of course, they wouldn't talk to us, but I wonder whether there would be that openness now, to be honest, because, you know, the call is for US agricultural exports to stop doing, you know, to stop really cutting the legs away from underneath farmers elsewhere in the world, to stop doing the kinds of things that the Gates Foundation is up to. We tried to meet with them as well. They wouldn't talk to us. But I mean, I think that there's a sort of negative program here, which would be really important. You know, we need debt relief for the global South so that, you know, the global South doesn't have to export, you know, to really turn its land into America's coffee, sugar, tropical products fields, and instead folk can start you know, building an economy that really focuses on local food sovereignty. But then we also, you know, here in the United States, we have so many, as you say, frontline communities who get it, right? You know, the D-Town Farms, or you know, the Black Dirt Farm Collective in Maryland. There are loads of farms, you know, and even we had the president of the National Family Farm Coalition, Jim Goodman, and you know, the National Family Farm Coalition, together with its partners in Via Campesina, understand the message that Denise shared, which is that the way to fight climate change is to have an archipelago of sustainable farms that build soil fertility, that sequester carbon in the ground, and that are part of a different kind of food economy. So there are lots of positive you know, programs out there, and Denise, it's so lovely to see you here and to see you in the film. And yeah, the last thing you need is for me to mansplain that. So I'll defer to Denise on this, as with many other things. But thank you for the question, and thank you for your work, Heather.
You're too kind, Raj, and because I mean, seriously, I didn't get to look at the film before we got on here, and I saw the film with you in Iowa City, which wasn't complete then, so I know the parts you're talking about. But to me, you know, the whole thing, I go up and down. It's a roller coaster about whether or not we're making progress or whether, because I've been doing this now for 45 years and I try to stay up and positive about the fact that we are making change, but we can't make incremental change anymore. And that's the thing that really bothers me, is that we're willing to take these little, my Latin teacher used to call sops to cerbis, was these, I don't know, that was a long time ago, but anyway, we have to have major change, and we have to, that it's the incrementalness of it that really gets me these days.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks for showing up.
So I want to follow up briefly. We talked a little bit before, Raj, and I said that I also am a Return Peace Corps volunteer from Paraguay. I have served in Paraguay, and it was so similar to what Heather was saying. I remember seeing the fields when you had the fields of what we call mandioca, cassava. We were like, oh, look, I haven't seen a field of cassava, and so in 25 years since I served, right? But what struck me was when Anita was talking about how with the family of, how much of this do you consume, right? And it struck me because one of the biggest things that I saw in Paraguay, when I served in Paraguay, it was the farmers had mostly the diversity of crops to sustain the village. And then there were some crops that went to a middleman to be sold on the market, right, for fiber or for food. And now within 25 years, with the introduction of Monsanto and now Bayer, it's all monocropping, and the villagers are starving because they can't feed themselves because all of the fields have been turned into monocropping soybeans and or cotton. So it's just, I'm wondering if what the suggestion would be to get together, to really focus on, I think somebody in the film said, we need to really create these networks of small farmers, of these 1, 2, 3, 5 acre plots, not the 1,100 acres that one of the farmers was talking, and they were growing all a monocrop on those 1,100 acres. Would you, what would be the big rock changes that you would suggest, that we suggest, to the Heathers who are working in the USDA, or to our, politicians?
Well, there are projects like the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. So visions for change that recognize the histories of power that are written into the land, and dispossession that are written into the land, and enslavement that are written into the land, right? So all of that matters. And what excites me about the Red, Black, and Green New Deal is ideas around how we might care for the soil in different ways, and how we might share the soil in different ways. I mean, right now, America is going through a period of profound land reform in which generations of farmers are aging out and selling to trust funds. That's why Bill Gates is America's largest farmer right now. And that process of land reform, in which the land gets concentrated in the hands of a few and it gets turned into an asset class, is profoundly dangerous to any kind of future food sovereignty in this country. So I definitely think that there are ways in which everything from reform of financial regulation to new forms of tenure, the work of the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, I think is very interesting in this regard. But there are lots of organizations that are sort of chipping away at this. But I do think that the covering policy has to be something like a big policy like the Red, Black, and Green New Deal that involves a world of care and repair, reparations, not just for enslavement and for the genocide that happened on this land, but also the ongoing crap that America is doing overseas. That's the problem is that, and part of the vision for this film, one of the reasons for this film was that often this incremental change is all we're peddled. You've seen these food films, damn it, where it begins with people of color suffering, and then it'll be a talking head, me or Vandana Shiva, or God forbid, Jeffrey Sachs or something, and saying, yeah, the poor have it tough. And then, towards the end, you see, the music changes, you see jangly guitar music and white people in farmers markets, and you're told, look, if only we buy organic kale, everything will be fine. The time for that shit's gone. And what was important about this film was, here are folk from northern Malawi who have ended patriarchy and ended hunger in their village insofar as they can, by adopting agroecological practices. And that's big change. We were talking earlier, Jules, about, Winston being this sort of unreconstructed chauvinist at the beginning of the film. And by the end, he's not. And, America is like Winston. And that's, unfortunately, people can't move away. And, America's definitely there. And America's worried about what its friends are going to think if it changes. But America does need to. And there are people ready to help. And people already kind of sitting America down saying, well, you believe in the Bible. Here's a way of reading the Bible that's just requires you to change your behavior. And these ideas, these ways of holding America to a higher standard, I think that's what we're all waiting for. And America is not America yet to me, to use Langston Hughes's phrase. But the idea that big change is possible, I think, has to be front and center, and showing that big change, at least in microcosm in terms of Winston, was vital for the film to work, because otherwise we would just say, look, we can't expect big change. We can only shoot for small change, when big change is both what we need and what communities around the world are doing anyway, despite us. Well, very quickly, by the way, I see here, Jean is asking for an update on Anita. Anita and the rest of the gang had a very rough COVID, not because there were terribly many infections. I mean, Malawi's infection rate was very low, but because so much of the Malawian economy depends on remittances from other parts of the world. When the rest of the world went into lockdown, the money flows back to Malawi seized up, and so did the economy. And of course, since we still have Malawi on a string in terms of its debt, and because we won't allow the vaccines that we paid for, like Moderna, to be manufactured royalty-free and without the patents that, I was pleased that President Biden just said, let's waive the patents, but he knew full well that it would take forever at the World Trade Organization for any of that to happen. And the short of it is that Malawi has gone through a pretty rough recession. Anita and the families that you saw in the film are fine in terms of COVID, but it's been very hard in terms of being able to sell those climate change stoves, for example, when there's no real money circulating in the economy. So it's been tough, but they're emerging from it and starting to do more trainings, and these trainings, particularly around gender and agroecology, are spreading not just in Malawi but beyond. And we were also able in this film to do things that helped move them along. So we didn't pay anyone in the film for their participation, but we did pay full commercial rates. So that's like $5,000, I think, for the music. And so that went to the community. You saw them at the end of the film singing. So we paid them, commercial rates, same as we paid our composer here. And that money really helped in that moment. And that was, I think, the right way of doing it, where, we weren't paying anyone for their opinion, but we were certainly very grateful and rewarding the artistry and the music in ways that were, that helped basically pay everyone's salary for a year.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Raj.
Long time, Tracy. Hello. You haven't aged a day. Sorry, gang. Tracy and I have known each other since Nam, and upstairs there's a painting of her clearly that's just dilapidated. Yes. Hello.
Hi. It's really good to see you here. And I did not watch the movie, but now I'm going to, because it seems like it's that good combination of both, like, there's doom on the way, but here is a potential place of hope and inspiration. So I am going to invite you to disabuse me. Actually, not just Raj, there's a lot of wisdom in this Zoom room. So anyone please disabuse me of this, but I've gotten involved with this like sustainable ag NGO effort to show up at the National and Northeast Associations of State Department of Agriculture meetings. It's just these meetings that happen every year where they form policy positions and network and yada yada. And when I went to the NASDA meeting in New Mexico in 2019, climate change was like all over the agenda, on everyone's mind. But the big presenters in the room were these venture capital funded, like millennial run, like Silicon tech bros who want to save the planet, are like, I don't doubt that they're like legit concerned about climate change, but also they're using it to like profit and get rich. And so I want the solutions that it sounds like, well, just knowing you and your work for the past, I don't know, 18 years, like I want those to be the solutions that happen. But like, I'm starting to feel that like, we are like racing the clock here. Everyone knows that. Like, I'm starting to like sort of like begrudgingly maybe start to think that like it is going to be like, if we have like any hope for like the kind of fast-paced change that we need to make, is like Silicon Valley and venture capital really going to be the like kind of almost anti-hero that saves the day? Anti-hero is not the right word, but like can you just convince me that like that's not how it needs to go down? And I don't get the Shiba Inu joke.
But I mean, mercy, but no, Silicon Valley is not here to save the day. I mean, I live now in in this new Silicon Valley, Texas armpit, and it's not clear to me that if everyone starts driving a Tesla and eating Impossible burgers, that we will have a saved planet. Because I mean, this film talks about how, look, this is a structural problem. You can't shop your way out of this. There's no, I mean, unfortunately, the sort of green capitalist movement is really just trying to stick price labels on the planet and then monetize it and then turn it into yet another asset class without thinking about who it is that's excluded from this, from the capacity to live and afford their products. So, I mean, and the worst thing about Silicon Valley, of course, is it's profoundly anti-democratic. It is just about these bros, asking, what if we traded natural services on the stock exchange? What could possibly go wrong? What if we were able to sleep, look ourselves in the mirror and nonetheless drive a Maserati, an electric one? And this, I mean, basically two white dudes asking what if is the sort of operating, the standard operating procedure for Silicon Valley. And I enough with the patriarchy already, and enough with white guys trying to save things. That track record's not good. The good news is that there are processes that work. I mean, so in Europe, I'm part of a group called the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems. Very pompous, but what it basically means is in Europe, we got together the groups of like unions, farmers, farm workers, anti-hunger advocates, environmentalists, and helped built a policy process as well as a set of policies that were going to replace the common agricultural policy. And that organizing was also part of the transformation. So by having everyone having these difficult conversations around farmers and farm workers, those are tough conversations, and holding space for that meant that there were ways of working through some of these difficulties to create a food policy. And then in the end, this food policy came out, and it just so happened that at the same time, the European Union was having a leadership transition, and many of these ideas found their way into the European Union, not because the ideas were merely good, but also because there was organizing behind them. And the movements that had gotten together to develop these policies were already there with better ideas, and it was democratic, and it happened in part because everyone was prepared to move, and in part because they were ready to create the pressure, and in part because there was just a structural opportunity, and there was a moment. That moment, I think, has been lost with the next farm bill in the United States already. I think you're right that ESG investors, environmental and social and governance investors, are going to be running roughshod over all of this, and the National Farmers Union seems to have thrown its lot in with the Farm Bureau, and that's not a good sign. But I do think that there are ways of imagining, even in the United States, these grand coalitions between movements of folk involved in sustainable agriculture and anti-hunger advocates and environmental advocates, and piecing it all together for something like a Green New Deal, Red, Black, and Green New Deal, is, I think, the opposite of what Silicon Valley has to offer. And I think that there's everything to organize for, because along the way, you're swapping ideas about what what solutions work. And you'll see in the film that there are already people doing that. And it seems to me a betrayal of them to concede just 1 inch to Silicon Valley when there's everything to fight for still. So I don't know, Tracy, whether you're convinced, but I do. There are enough groups in this film who are doing so much amazing stuff, and there are so many people in this room who are doing that, that I feel like we can fight a little bit more for something much bigger than Silicon Valley can ever give us. Thank you, Tracy. I'm glad you're not either.
Thanks, Tracy, for that great prompt as well. We have 2 minutes, folks. So I feel like we have time for one more question, and then I'll drop some info in the chat box for folks for this evening if you want to continue this conversation. Then anyone else? Sarah.
Hi, my name's Sarah Moore, and I work with a lot of mid-sized farmers that do that traditional row cropping, corn and soy. And this conversation around not being able to take those baby steps anymore and needing to take those bigger steps, I feel like this is really where it can happen, because they're not part of the Silicon Valley giant ag, but they can make an impact on a lot more acres than those smaller farmers can, not to discredit all of those efforts that are going on. So in your experience, I guess this is open to everyone in this chat, what has been your most successful way of working with these farmers and communicating to them the importance of these issues in order to instigate change or even conversations around change?
Well, I mean, in brief, and then I'm afraid I'm going to have to duck out. But I mean, nothing succeeds like success, and farmers seeing other farmers making a go of it, on medium-sized farms with diversified farming systems, is, I mean, it recruits, and that's important. But I also think that the big successes I've seen, at scale, happen when farmers are not in it by themselves, but are linked to things like to transformations in government. One of my favorite transformations is in Brazil, where because there was organizing between farmers and parents and anti-hunger advocates in cities, it was possible to pass a policy where 30% of food consumed in schools was from local farms. And then if those farms were growing agroecologically, the farms got a 30% premium on their prices. And recognizing that, look, you can't make money under this system from doing the right thing. And so you're forced into doing the wrong thing. And farmers kind of admit, every conversation in this film is a conversation about how can you make a go of it as a farmer. And the realizing that changing the broken rules at the moment and fixing them has to be part of the solution. But having the links between, say, farms and guaranteed purchasing provides a way for farmers to be able to take on some of that risk, because it's not them. I mean, it's their risk, but it's society's reward, and we need to rebalance the equation in favor of farmers, and that means and farm workers, and that means undertaking these kinds of transformations not by just saying, hey, farmer blogs, you've got, look over there at this teeming field of lots of different crops happening at the same time. Isn't it magic? But rather to be thinking about how it is that we can form these kinds of alliances, because the economics of this moment are desperately unkind to people who want to save the planet.
Thank you, Raj.
I'm so sorry that I have to leave, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And I'm hoping this conversation will be able to carry on.
We're so grateful. We'll send you a recording of the chat tonight. Good wishes and all of our energy on your trip to Scotland. And yeah, we thank you so much, and good things to come.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.